the director of SEA Junction. SEA Junction, for those who don't know, is a small venue which is here on the 4th floor, and we focus on all aspects of Southeast Asia, and we have some core themes, and one of the themes is, of course, mobility in the region, including migration, refugees, and other forms of mobility. Today we are particularly pleased to work together with the Mekong Migration Network. It's, I think, the only network which covers countries of the mainland Southeast Asia, and is composed of a mix of academic institutions and NGOs and migrant groups and other kinds of groups. It was started around 2004 with support from the Rockefeller Foundation at the time, but it has developed into much more than what was envisioned at the time. It has survived for almost 15 years, and it has been able to raise issues, key issues related to migration over time. And today we are discussing the impact of COVID and how it has impacted on the condition of migrants and what it implies for them. Please, I will give now the floor to Pranom, who is going to moderate this session.
Thank you very much, Leah. And thank you for SEA Junction, who always have a warm welcome and the space for the migrants and refugees in this region. Also, this opening a photo exhibition is co-organizing together with SEA Junction and Mekong Migration Network, as Leah mentioned. This photo exhibition will look at the resilience and uncertainty back home migrant workers amid the pandemic downturn. As we know, for Thailand, we have maybe a little bit situation better than the other countries in the region or in the world. But COVID is still impacting our life, every one of us. But the migrant workers are having unprecedented impact to their life. As we can imagine, due to their precarious legal status. In the morning, we had their press conference at the Foreign Correspondent Club, and we had the Ministry of Labour of Thailand talking about 2.4 million migrant workers who are documented. But as we know, in Thailand, migrant rights group has been estimated of more than 4 million of the migrants who are doing various jobs in Thailand. And also, we launched the pre-testing of the research result of the in-depth study. Mekong Migration Network start to urge the government to provide immediate support and response to the migrants who are affected by the COVID-19 since beginning of the pandemic. And in July, Mekong Migration Network released the statement and also the recommendation to the government. And then we realized we have to conduct an in-depth study that center on the migrants and the returnees experiences in navigating and negotiating the evolving circumstances they will present with. The study gave greater weight to the migrant narratives or their reality and provided a textual account of the option migrant workers were presented with during the pandemic. The choice they have made due to the situation, there were circumstances, and the consequences of the choice they're making on their life. But that's the research. Not every one of us would like to read the research, do we? So we're thinking maybe we should come up with a complementary storytelling project. So that's why this photo exhibition is happening. We would like to have a virtual storytelling project that aims to amplify the voices and the stories that show the faces, but the reality we can see very, very virtually to highlight the migrant, again, narratives, but imperative, and their story which migrants are provided to, for them to be able to express their story in their own turn. As go together with the data we collected, which is abstract information, yeah. And we are very glad to work together with John, but also our partner, with Mekong Foundation, but also the FED, who are presenting in this panel as well. Today, we would like to have a light conversation in a very heavy story of the impact of the migrant. We are very honored to have the migrant representative, Soumyat Lai here. She's a women worker representative who will tell us about her life and the impact of the COVID-19. We have John here, who are the photographer who work with the Mekong Migration Network on the project, and he will tell us more later in his presentation about how we feel about the experiences. We have Brahm from Mekong Foundation, the organization who work on the rights of the migrant in Thailand for a long time, and we have Aung. He's from Foundation for Education and Development, FED, in Mexico. So, we would like to start with John. Yes, with John. Since we opened their photo, so tell us about your experiences of doing this project.
Good evening. My name is John Hulme. I'm a British documentary photographer. I've been working and living in Thailand for somewhat more than 20 years. I'm pleased to say I live here permanently now. I live in Chiang Mai. Most of my work is focused on marginalised communities, from refugees to child labour and migrant labour. In fact, it was 16 years ago that I first started to do essays on the migrant situation. With this pandemic hitting us, I've done very little for the past 10 months. So when I was contacted by Rico, the director of Rico Harriman, the director of MMN, I was delighted to hear that they were looking at the specific problems that migrants were confronting due to the pandemic. I was delighted until I realized the time scale that we were looking at. We started the project certainly no more than 5 weeks ago. So all of the photographs you see this evening are taken within a very short time span. Ordinarily, if I was putting on an exhibition or giving a presentation, I'd be able to draw from the 16 years a huge body of work, and there would be no issue with putting on pictures that convey the essence of the problem. But fortunately, the organised teams that MMN had put in place with their partners meant that when we went into some of these communities, the facility was offered to me was absolutely brilliant. We were able to go into areas that, had I just arrived on a bus, that would have been impossible for me to access. So, from that, I'm quite happy with some of the pictures. I would have liked longer. I think photographers always probably do. A few other points I wanted to mention, but they escape me at the moment. On this project, we went to 4 different areas: Chiang Mai, Liaison, Pranom, and Pranom. I've actually visited most of these areas in the past and done a lot of my own work. And so little has changed in 16 years. It's the same living conditions, the same issues, the same problems. All of them, of course, have been exacerbated by COVID. Some of the stories that we documented were really quite horrendous, how people are trying to manage on either no work or 50% of the previous earnings they had. Some of the issues that stuck with me, that in English I'd say irked me, they bothered me a little bit, were the fact that so many are unemployed that they're having to there's been a slowdown in the factories, so they're having to find work elsewhere, and that really is in agriculture. So you have people that were formerly operating sewing machines are now having to cut sugar cane or some other issue. In the communities we visited, there were people bringing buckets of water from a company tap, which was several hundred yards away. And I learned that they were being charged $1 for a bucket. It isn't very much, it's nothing. But it just felt it was another method of extracting some of the losses the factories were getting in a really petty way. The other issue was the cost of electricity. The standard rate in Thailand, I think it's about 5 or 6 baht, but they were charged double that, which just seemed unfair and again taking advantage of the situation.
Thank you, John. We'll come back with you more also the second round. Yeah? Now we go to the Vietnamese line, who will tell us the real story of the migrant experiences during the pandemic or even before the pandemic, and how she felt when she saw the photo as well of the other migrants in the other area, but also in the other occupation, and maybe any photo which she can be related to her experiences.
And moreover, the factory that I work for, they also send our duties to other factories on the Japanese stuff, so that it becomes even more difficult for us to get a result other things. ကျမတို့အလုပ်လုပ်ခံရတဲ့အကြောင်းများတော့ကျမတို့လုပ်တဲ့တကယ်ကပြည်ဝင်လောကကများရှိပါဘူး။ပြည်ဝင်လောကကတော့95ရန်များရှိပါဘူး။ဆိုတော့300ပိုင်းတော့ဆက်တယ်ပေါ့နော်။နားလာတယ်ဒီဘာလို့ဆက်လဲဆိုတော့လေးကြည့်ပြရတယ်လို့ပြောပါတယ်။ဆိုတော့ဒီမှာကတည်းကပြည်ဝင်လေးသိထားပါတယ်။အားပြည့်ကြည့်ကိုလည်းတော့လုပ်ပေးနေပါဘူး။အဲဒီကမှမလုပ်ဘူးလည်းလုပ်ပေးနေပါဘူး။ So the previous factory that I work for, we didn't get the minimum wage, we got the wage under the minimum wage, and then we also didn't get the 3% of our salary being that it is for the tourist, and then we also usually have the day off. ကျမတို့အလုပ်သမားတွေကဒီပြောင်းလောကရရှိဖို့ပေါ့နော်တောင်းဆိုဖို့ဆိုင်နေနေမှာဒီကိစ္စရှိကြတယ်ရောကျွန်တော်တို့လုပ်ခဲ့ပါတယ် So for those who we are gathering and attending with the company about that, so the employer found out about this, so we were asked to do our job. So for the day, we say no answer, we made one time, we look at my way, we have had the down to one of the main things, just what we are sometimes they work so those things is accommodation that employer provides. So we have to live with the labor. And this is the time you share your opinion. So we have to find out the other accommodation which is cheaper outside the factory.
ဒီတော့ဆိုရင်ဆန်းကဒီအောက်မှာရောက်ကြတယ်ဆိုရင်တစ်ထောင်လောက်ကြတဲ့အခါမှာကြားနေရတယ်ပါလေ
So before we see like we have to see like what are the values about I mean that now we have to find a place that will cost around 1,000 per month.
ကိုယ်ကလာမှာအလုပ်လုပ်တယ်ဘယ်လိုမှမရတော့လေဘယ်ကလောက်ကြပါလဲပြီးတော့အပြည့်လည်းများလာပါလေ
So even though we lot of jobs in the community is very difficult for younger workers, and then many of us having more and more there.
ဒီလိုစောင့်နေကြတာလို့တောင်းလာတဲ့မှာလည်းပြီးတော့ကြောင်းထူလာတယ်ခဏလေးတာပြန်ဖိုက်တာလောရပါတယ်တက်ကုန်ကြည့်တာလည်းတောင်းလိုက်လောရပါတယ်
For our environment, we have to find a job in the agriculture, like onion farm or corn farm, like that.
ဟိုရောက်တဲ့နေရာတော့ဟိုမှာလုပ်ကြတယ်လုပ်နိုင်တယ်ဒီနေရာတော့လုပ်နိုင်တော့ဒီမှာလည်းလောရပါတယ်
So for this kind of job, it is not easy for the women to do it, but for the men, it is easy for them to get the job in agriculture. But for the women, it is difficult. But somehow we have to work in order to do that.
ဒီလောကလည်းရှိတိုင်းမှာမရှိဘူးနော်ရှိတယ်လို့လိုက်လို့လည်းမရှိတယ်လို့နားနေရပါတယ်
Even though we don't have this everything, we just have like some working and then other things we don't have we don't have it economic.
လုံးလုံးဆိုင်တဲ့မှာပြန်တောင်းကန်တောင်းထားတဲ့ဒီလိုရှိရင်တော့ဒီဘက်ကတော့ဒီလိုရပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ပထမနာတော့တစ်ထောင်မရတယ်အခုကရပါဘူးပထမနာတစ်ထောင်မရတယ်နောက်ကြည့်ရတော့မလောက်ချော်ရပါတယ်
So those who go fire, like we have the CI book because the teacher security come from the factory. But it was really they got like in the first month we got 2,000 and in the second month we got like 5,000 baht.
ကျမတို့လူသမားတွေကိုဒီလိုမျိုးဖွဲ့စည်းနေရှိပါတယ်ဖွဲ့စည်းရတော့ဒီအားဖြင့်ဒီလိုမျိုးဒီစားတဲ့ဖွဲ့စည်းနေရဒီခိုင်းနေတဲ့ဒီနေ့ရှိမှာတော့ဒီကြောင့်လာတယ်
So during this pandemic, we also get a call from the NGO, like HRDF, EDO, and then LLC. They also support us by asking the donation from the Thai Red Cross. So now we have two times investment already.
တက်ချင်ပြီးအလုပ်တွေရှိတာဒီအမြင်ရတာဟန်တိတ်ရှိတာလို့
That we have received 2 times already from the Red Cross.
အလုပ်လုပ်လိုက်ပြီးတဲ့ချိန်မှာဘုသမားတွေရဲ့တော့ဘဝကာရီဆောင်းတွေကတန်းတူပြီးတော့ဆိုင်မှာပတ်သက်နေတာလည်းပြန်ပြီးပါဘူး
So when we pick our job, before we pick the job, we have to the employer deduct our salary for our people to extend for us. But then when we pick the job, we have a significant return anyway.
အလုပ်သမားတွေကအလုပ်လုပ်တဲ့ချိန်ကဆောင်းပတ်သက်တဲ့ဘဝနဲ့ချိန်နဲ့ဆောင်းပတ်သက်မှုပတ်သက်ရှိရတယ်တော့တတိရှိရတယ်နဲ့တော်တော်လုံးဖတ်ရောက်ခဲ့ရပါတယ်
So the fact that we have to pick the job is the fact that we also have to extend their people. So it becomes more difficult because we didn't have the employer as well. Then we don't have the money as well.
အခုအလုပ်သမားတွေကတော့ဘုရားဆိုင်ပြီးတော့ပွဲစားတွေနဲ့အတန်းလုပ်ထားပါတယ်
So for some workers, we borrow the money from others and then we hire the broker to extend their document.
ပတ်စံမတတ်နိုင်တဲ့လူတွေကတော့စာအုပ်တွေပေးကောင်းလာပါ
Those who cannot afford, we have to let their document expire.
အားလုံးလည်းပွဲစားနဲ့စာအုပ်တွေတက်တက်လုပ်လာပါတယ်
So I hire the broker to extend their document as well.
မြန်မာပြည်ပြန်လာပြီးတော့စာအုပ်တွေတက်တက်ရှိနေမှဖြစ်မှာမလို့ပါ
So I cannot do something in my yes. So anyway, I have to try to extend my document to be in time.
အလုပ်လုပ်ခံရတော့မြန်မာပြည်ရှိတဲ့မိဘတွေရှိတဲ့ပတ်စံတွေကိုမပြီးနိုင်တော့ပါဘူးမိဘတွေလည်းကျွေးတွေပြလာပါတယ်
So because I have lost my job, I cannot send back any money to my parents.
မာလူကလည်းမောဆောင်နေရတယ်
And they are also looking for the money that will be getting back to them.
ဒီကိုဗစ်ကာလမှာအလုပ်လုပ်ခံရတဲ့အချိန်မှာမြန်မာပြည်ကိုပြန်ဖို့လည်းစဉ်းစားပါသေးတယ်
So when I first quit my job, I will consider
လို့ပေါ့နော်ဒါကြောင့်ဒီတိုင်းနိုင်ငံမှာလည်းဆက်နေကြရပါတယ် But then I realized that even if I was back to Myanmar, I will not have to job, and then the health situation in Myanmar is also very good. So I see it like. အဲ့ဒီကမှကျတော့ပတ်စံရှာတာလို့ပြောပါတယ်။တရားလို့ဒီလိုနောက်ရလို့မရှိလို့ရှိရင်လည်းနောက်ရခံစားလို့ရပါသေးတယ်။ Stay in Thailand is easier to get a job. Like if I work one day, then I can survive for another day with the income that I can get into. နောက်ဆုံးပြောချင်တာတော့ကျွန်မအနေနဲ့ဒီတိုင်းနိုင်ငံမှာအလုပ်ကောင်းရဖို့မျှော်လင့်နေပါတယ်။ So this is the only hope that I'm seeing Thailand to get a better job.
Thank you very much, Somiat Lai and Paul for that story. The story of Somiat Lai as a women worker in Thailand may be their individual unique story, but hopefully the issues in addressing will providing us with more questioning when you look at the photo of the other migrant. Because as we heard, the pre-existing violation happening on her and her colleagues in the factory on labor rights is existing before but also during the COVID. They've been unfair dismissal, they didn't get minimum wages, they had to look for the other accommodation and housing when everyone is being told to stay home during the pandemic. But the migrants are looking for the new route to protecting them during that time. Yeah? And we are so hoping we will try to look at more at their humanity side of it. When we look at each photo of their migrant here, do they get social security compensation? Do they be able to keep in touch or stay with their loved ones? Do they be able to go back to home and where's a home? If you live in Thailand for long, you might have a family here, but you also have family in country of origin like Myanmar, Cambodia. So I think her presentation is give us a lot of narrative of more maybe questioning as well about what exactly the story behind each of the photo of the migrants we have it in our photo exhibition. We will go next to migrant support group who actually facilitated for John with the process of his taking photo with element. If you go to Brahm first, as MAP Foundation is working with migrants for many years in Thailand. My question is, what's the most challenges MAP facing during the pandemic? Or how is it when you facilitate for the MAP facilitate for John to take the photo? I saw one photo here, our friend A in Meso, big one, and continue to do what he's continuing. It said, hand up those who do not have work permit. So he's asking here because it's the issue of migrant return to Myanmar at the second friendship bridge at Meso. And at the immigration office asked those who are returned home about their visa status. I guess that staff was here to translating immigration and also make sure everyone can return home. I hand over to you now.
So, migrants suffering over the economic downturn from COVID, we say resilience and uncertainty. The resilience is that they've been living here just as long as many of us. I've been here 20 years. Many of these migrants have been here 10, 20 years. They consider Thailand their home. So when they're faced with the decision, as we say, is it really a decision to return to Myanmar or to stay in Thailand, there were a number of people who didn't feel they had an option to go back in because Myanmar is not their home anymore. They don't have job options there. And there was even more uncertainty about food. They maybe had a house there, but then after that there was grave uncertainty. And many of the people still have families there, but those families rely on the remittances that these people are making and sending home. what we found out was that a number of workers who lost their jobs or were only working part-time were finding second jobs and going into debt. Sometimes they were going into debt so they could send money home, still sending money home. So they were going into debt for food, but the work, the money they earned from the work was going to pay their rent and electricity, as was mentioned earlier. Some of these people worked in hotels previously, and then suddenly went out and started working in construction because they needed money. They could only get a couple of days of work, and then when the hotel opened up again, this woman, who's actually one of the in one of the photographs, she has 3 children. She's a single mother, and so she was going out to work in construction and then doing the hotel as well. So this is the resilience part. It's not just resilience though. These people are very strong, and they've been doing this for years. Migrants in Thailand constantly are adapting to the new situation. Policies continue to change. Economic impacts affect them the most. Oftentimes, they're the first ones laid off. With COVID, restaurants and hotels were hard hit, and a lot of migrants worked in those. In Phuket, there were 60,000 migrants who were unemployed because of the closing of these resorts, and because the tourism industry was also a big draw for migrant workers, not just Thais. And the interesting part is that they're able to build up this debt with local vendors. I don't know exactly how that works, but for me that's an interesting note because it means that there's a certain amount of trust, and that a lot of these workers who decided to stay because they have debts to pay, and so they're paying them off. Let's see. So resilience and uncertainty. There's still a lot of uncertainty. That's the problem. These people say that, if it's bad now, and it gets worse later, then what? So they're literally hand to mouth in some cases. When MAP, among other organizations, FED, HIPF, the Red Cross, Migrant Working Group, there were a number of NGOs that received funds to help support migrant workers with immediate food aid. But we were only able to really provide a very short, enough food to provide for a very short period of time, about a week at most. It was enough to give them a buffer, but they say that it's not enough. And the woman I was referring to, who has 3 children, she was saying there was a period of time where all they were eating was rice with pork fat and maybe mama noodles. And so they're hurting, and they're still hurting. The people the migrants who receive Social Security are limited. There are only certain occupations that really are able to access Social Security in the first place. Those who are in the MOU, which is the formal regularized migration, these people generally are able to access Social Security. However, the Thai government didn't announce that unemployment benefits would be available to migrants who had Social Security until, when was it? Late. It was late. There was already a lockdown, or else there was soon to be a lockdown. And so migrants had to make a decision, a quick decision. So a number of people went home thinking that they weren't going to get their benefits. And then when they found out that they could receive the Social Security, they were very disappointed because now the borders are closed and they can't return. So they're at home, in their home country at least, without a job and unable to return to Thailand. So then there's many other migrants who have informal or partial documentation. There's border passes, there's certificate of identification, there's other semi-documented migrants. Many of them are actually able to access Social Security, but it depends on the employer. And there are some occupations that don't receive Social Security, such as agriculture, domestic work, fisheries, and things like that. So the ability to benefit from Social Security is limited. And as we heard, even the amount that they receive is minimal. It's not the same as what the Thais receive, but that's also partly because of the amount of time that they're enrolled. So they help each other out, they find work where they can, and they survive. Migrants are really strong.
Good evening. My name is Aung. I'm from FDD, Liaison. Normally, I work with migrant community for many years, around 8 years, mostly based in Liaison. I work for different community, like in agriculture sector, and also in construction, and also factory. So during the pandemic, I see lots of migrants are struggling, as my partner, Matt, and migrant worker representative, she talked about it already, but most of them can't wait. But I would like to point out about education. For migrant learning center, in Bangkok, they have a migrant learning center. Currently, they cannot reopen the school. They have to shut down the learning center, and most of the kids they have to stay at home. So this one also is a little bit difficult for the parents. Normally, the parents they send their kid to school and they can go to work, but right now they have to take care of the kid and they cannot fully focus on their work as well. And the kids also they have to stay at home for a longer time, and they really want to go to school. But in Bangkok, education team they try to find out the method to teach the children, even the school cannot open home-based learning. They come out with the home-based learning system. They train the migrant teacher, and the teacher can go to the community to teach the kids at the community, small group teaching system. And you can see the photo behind. That's one of the photos about migrant learning. Migrant teacher they teach the kids at home, and only 5 or 6 kids part-time, something like that. And also the teacher they are struggle for survival. For the school, they really want to open the school, and they also face funding problem. During the COVID, they cannot open the school, and so they have a challenge for actively to present to the donor as well. This I can see clearly. So, but I'm really proud of migrant teacher because they did not open the learning center for today for this year. They opened since the migrants here in Thailand, like for more than like 50 years already. They keep opening. Before they don't have a donor, they just like running, and now they have a donor, and then the donor is cannot continue, but they still find the way to continue the education. Like the parents supporting, the community supporting, and they still keep the migrant learning center going until now. For this year, they cannot open, but they still go for home-based learning center, home-based learning system, and that's resilience. The kid can continue their education no matter the COVID pandemic. They did not get the approval from the Thai government to reopen the school. Yes, that's the migrant learning center. But for the another part is the migrant children who can access to Thai school. I would like to. Hello. For migrant children, they also have a chance to go to Thai school as well. For this group of children, they can go to Thai school normally, but right now the Thai school they are also like reopen again, but open very late, and they can go, but they can study like half day, not normally like all day. They have half day and they have to go back, and because they have a limit, children limit at the school.
We will come back on that note. Thank you very much, Aung. You also show us the story of the migrant teacher on the support groups who try very much to continue their support to the migrant workers during the pandemic. So the resilience is not only happening with the migrants working themselves, but also their support groups who try their best to continue to provide their for example, the education to the migrant children. And also, we're talking about a lot about the children. We should also mention the migrant women who are the mothers, who have to take care of their kids when the kids cannot go to the migrant school or the Thai school. Because as we know, during the pandemic, when the children have to stay at home, it's increasing the caring responsibility of the parents, and mostly are falling into the women, the mothers. Some kids are the father, if the father is a carer. So that's also the condition at home. I have a look at the booklet, and we have in both Thai and English. I took one photo of the Myanmar. She is the women migrant worker from Myanmar. She and her husband were working as a ferry boat driver along the route between Pranom, the province of Pranom. Yeah? And one of the quotes she saying, "When the border closed down, we suddenly had no income at all. That made me mentally break down. I went to the ocean and cried and shouted out loud. I even wanted to jump into the water to commit suicide, but thinking about my son made me keep going on." So maybe resilience is happening because of the love. Love makes us resilient. Hope makes us resilient. Yeah? That's why we still be able to strong. Especially for the migrants, as you can hear from the story, it's very difficult situation. But as Somwong also mentioned, I decided to continue to be in Thailand, to continue to work. and hopefully to be able to supporting my family. My second round question, which before we open the floor to the audience, is what is your hope? What make us all of us continue to do what we doing there? Who would like to start?
Education. Currently, some of the teachers they have to go to work in agriculture sector for daily work as a migrant, and they also work for the construction to get the income. Just for the teacher survivor, they struggle to get the kind of work, and then later they can provide to their learning center also.
Yes, your hope for education. Because that's your passion, yeah?
Yes.
Every day is working on education of the migrants.
My hope for the education, I hope for the next year they can start the learning center normal, like they can reopen and then the kids can go to school, and also the teacher can come back to teach the kids, and that's what be good for the children, like they can study regularly, and also their parents can send their kid to the school, so the parents can work for the family during the COVID, because there are not lots of work during the COVID, so the parents can earn more money after suffering for long periods of loss of income. Long-term goals. For long-term hope, I would like Thai government and also Myanmar government to pay attention to the migrant learning center, because migrant children are also like the kids of Myanmar, and also can be kids in Thailand because they were born here, so they have the right to study, they have the right to education. So they should get legal acknowledged from the learning center as well.
Would you like to say something?
Yes. So one of the things that we found is that migrants, as I said, have been here a long time. They feel that Thailand is their home now. But they're still forced into this registration system that makes them temporary. It changes, it's challenging to stay in, and it keeps them temporary, uncertain. Migrants need a long-term form of residence. My hope is that this COVID thing will make the Thai government reassess its relationship with migrants and allow them to stay as citizens.
I'm motivated to do the pictures of marginalised communities because of the vast gulf of inequality that exists throughout the world, not just here in Thailand. How we bridge that gap of inequality, that's the question. I really don't see at the moment any major advances that are taking us towards a more equitable world. The other day I read that 26 of the world's richest, most wealthy individuals hold over half of the world's population, the lower percentile of the world. They have greater accumulated wealth. There's maybe 26 people sitting here this evening. So I'm not the person to ask how we're going to overcome that. But that's what I would like to see happen, is greater equity for everyone.
John, motivation also can lead us to the home, yeah? And then Thailand talking about their state welfare, they are more and more talking about we want the new constitutional, which is including the welfare. And we hope that will be Thailand will be thinking about population who are non-Thai, like migrant refugees, but also the ethnics. and the so-called stateless community as well, to be able to include it in that welfare, because we talk about social security, we talk about, but that's for the worker. We should have some other social protection, which is covering everyone when we have the pandemic, or even in the normal health and social protection. Yeah. Tell us what your home again. I know you already said you will continue to be here and then working in Thailand to supporting your family. Is there other home you would like to tell us?
The other hope that I'm having is to get very good in Thailand and then save a lot of money and then go back to Myanmar one day and then visit you.
You mean hoping to go back home, yeah, to Myanmar, to the family there in one day when you be able to. Thank you very much. We would like to open the discussion. If anyone here as an audience would like to say something, either to the panelists here or tell us how you feel when you see the exhibition or any other comment, feel free to start.
Thank you all for this presentation. I come from a visual background, so I'm especially interested in the images of what's going on along the border. But I'm curious about this notion of the migrants being allowed to stay and accepted as citizens. And my point of reference is the United States, with the migrants coming up from the south. But the United States, the structure of the country is predicated on immigration. So there are structures and laws in place to allow the immigrants to come in, and then it's just arguing throughout history how many should come in and vilifying them. Blah. But in Thailand, from my understanding, there's no such structure in place. And in my experience living here as a white male, I feel like the government doesn't want anybody here. That's just kind of a protectionist Thai cultural thing. And personally, I respect it. So when we say we want a pathway for the Myanmar migrants who are coming here and working here to one day gain Thai citizenship, is there any historical reason to believe that that's something that the Thai government will ever agree to?
Any other comment before we come back to the panelists? Yes. There was a question, yes. Yes, was comment and question. In the back. Yes, we take a couple of the questions before we come back to the panelists.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, you mentioned about the condition of the migrant workers as it's been like 20 years and still remain the same. What is the main obstacles that you think about it? Like what is the main obstacle that make migrants cannot improve their life or making a social stratification that go higher on that?
Yep. Any other comment on the question? Okay. Maybe we come back to the who would like to respond to two questions, the main two questions we have. Maybe we start with the main obstacles. And we'll see whether citizenship is possible in Thailand.
Well, when the children are born in Thailand and they register with schools, it's actually a pathway to citizenship. It's rare, but it happens. So there are a number of migrant children who have gone through the full cycle, and please correct me, and have actually been able to gain citizenship. Yes. So it's there. it's up to the Thai government to expand that. You're right, they're very protective of the Thai citizenship. Citizen is a strong word, but if it's not that, at least a long-term residence, something to that effect. Because in the Constitution, I believe it says that non-Thais are allowed all the same rights except for voting rights. Correct? In the Constitution, the Thai Constitution says that all people in the country are allowed the same rights except for voting rights. Right? So if that was the case, then people should be allowed to stay for long periods of time, especially if they've already shown that they're here for long periods, right? So instead of making people temporary, and I think that happens to all foreigners. We have visas, and we have to maintain our status, and it's more difficult for migrants because they're often linked to employers, even though some of us are also linked to employers. And to get to your question, that is actually part of the problem, is that migrants remain with a tenuous status. So if they're fired from their job or something, they'll have to take recourse if they can, but basically their registration is linked to their employment. So, and there's only certain conditions that allow them to change employers. So that is one of the things that keeps them at the same level they've been for the past 20 years. That and the fact that they know, and the employers know that there is a vast pool of potential migrant labor to draw from, and the Thai government also having in place policies that limit migrants to specific occupations only. They basically consider the unskilled labor, the manual labor. So one of the things that we're hoping for in our work that FED is also unified with, and that is that education, that migrant children going through Thai education will eventually be able to access higher skilled jobs. And that as a generational thing, these people as they grow up will be able to improve their status. And we may actually see a change. But it may have taken 20 years to see it.
Any other comments on the no, while we're waiting for the panel list to thinking whether they want to comment, I think it's been very, you need to stuck in the cave to get the Thai citizenship. That's happened to 12 while voting in Chiang Rai instead. Yeah, you see some of the situation when Thailand is suddenly willing to give citizenship. So you need to stuck in the cave and being a big world news, then you get them. Or you need to get you have the special talent. Like we have Somwong, yeah, the child migrant children who doing that, what you call in English, the model plane thing. You have that talented, so Thailand will be love to have you as citizenship. I think if I allow to also give the comment as the moderator, before we even talk about citizenship, we should talk about social coherence. Social coherence or social protection. Maybe some of the migrant doesn't want to get the Thai citizenship anyway, like she's mentioned, she wants to go home. But we have the other intergeneration of the new born of their children who only know Thailand as home. And there are some possibility of them getting some status. For example, now Thailand having 10 years temporary card for the migrant to be able to stay and go to the school. So there are some level of it, but I think if you see a migrant only from their employment status, then you only see them as a laborer. and that's why it becomes temporary. But if we see the migrant as part of the social coherence and member of the society, then we should have the social protection, and that we can start to looking at the possibility of either they want to be here long term or they want to go country of origin, something like that. Yeah. I tried to ask her whether she wants to say something about the main obstacle. The question about what is stopping us, why we're not moving anywhere better in terms of treating the migrant in the country from many years. Anybody would like to comment on that? Or member of the member of the audience.
I want to go back to Brahm and actually stressing the system we have at the moment for migrants is not the same as a male American or white Italian in Thailand. And this is part of the problem. The registration doesn't cover migrants properly. They are saying unofficial by definition. They are allowed to work but not to live in Thailand, which is absurd, of course. I mean, how can you work if you cannot live in Thailand? I think this is really the root of the problem, the double standards that we all accept, and this is not only Thailand, it's all over Southeast Asia, that those skilled migrants have different rules than expat or high-skilled labor. And this keeps open, of course, the door to all kinds of exploitation and double standards and different kinds of treatment that is accepted culturally, de facto. We do not protest. We protest when agencies, etc., they just want to change a little bit the registration, but they are not challenging the registration itself. So the management system, the migration management system, should become one for everyone. This would be already a big step. Then we start to talk about residency, and we start to talk about nationality. That is, of course, would be also very welcome. If not nationality, at least the residency option, which doesn't exist, but is extremely difficult to get for everyone. Now, related to COVID, a very simple question. Will they be given vaccine or not, the migrants? This is already an issue in Singapore. Again, the double standard. All citizens are going to be given free. But what about the migrants, which are at the least in Singapore 25% of the population? So this should make us reflect about this kind of double standards that keep this unjust situation in place with COVID and even worse now with COVID.
Any response from the panel or any further comment? I think the question on the vaccine, whether including the migrant or not, in principle they must, because pandemic doesn't choose legal status or nationality. And in the public health perspective, everyone, the population in the country must be able to access to the vaccine, because if some of us can not have access to the vaccine and having the COVID, the society and the rest of us also getting the COVID or the pandemic. So I hope Thailand are staying in that principle of universal healthcare, which means giving the access to everybody in the effort to combat the pandemic, which I think Mission Public Health are trying to do their best to do their job on the pandemic. We just need both Mission Public Health and Mission Labor, Immigration, Police, Mission Interior to work together on the migrant there. Any other comments from the panel? Or yes?
I'm curious, the schools are now closed because of COVID.
is that a community decision that's made, or has the government said all schools must be closed?
It's a government decision. All schools are under the Ministry of Education. So they decided all migrant learning center should not open because it's not qualified, like social distancing or in terms of like preparation to reopen the school. So they have like several monitoring. They send the staff to the migrant learning center and they check everything, they monitoring. Until now, there's only two schools that's possible they can reopen, but still now they cannot reopen. Yeah.
It's a government decision.
That's also a double standard, right? Because the Thai students can go to school, but the migrant schools cannot, right?
Yeah. The Ministry of Education they give the reason because if one of migrant children they got affected with the COVID, so all of the impact area we have to shut down all the school. So they were not risk, and also for the lockdown, the area lockdown, the community lockdown when it happening. So they just said like that. And also good for the student, like not to for the student safety. Also they give the reason like that.
Let me clarify, can the Thai children go to school? Are the Thai schools open?
Yeah, in Thai, the children Thai school they can go, but they have this. They mentioned that in order to reopen, we have a long process by monitoring the safety, the health care department, they monitoring the school system, and so they can reopen. And want to clarify like two different things. Like Thai school, we have a good facility and a big school, but for migrants, it's like a very small location and poor facility. So that's the two different.
To be able to continue to support the migrant children access to the school, the Ministry of Education should come up with better support facilities and make sure that the social distancing school is also been supporting the hygiene and all the other facilities available to that community school, which run by the migrant teacher, which is something Thailand has been committed since 2005 for education for all policy. And now 2020, so that I think he also mentioned about better support and recognition for the migrant community school. No? Yes. Okay. I think after this we will have more interactive. After the talk of opening of this exhibition, we would like to invite Leah to giving some of the souvenir and the present to thank you all the speakers today who will come and speak to us. So we would like to invite you.
Open, but please don't run away. There is some food in the back, some drinks, so you can enjoy. And also, if you wish to give a donation for SEA Junction, please do so in the table in front. So with this, I declare the exhibition session open.